Art Loft is brought to you by
Where there is freedom, there is expression. The Florida Keys and Key West.
the Miami-Dade County Tourist Development Council, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade County Mayor, and the Board of County Commissioners, and by the Friends of South Florida PBS.
Hi, I'm Jamani Anamdi.
And I'm Lolo Reskin, and this is Art Loft.
Art Loft curates the best of South Florida's diverse art scene through thoughtful storytelling.
This is a special episode highlighting the Florida Keys. Surrounded by an ocean that is boundless, the creativity of the makers on these islands is too. Inspired by the chaos and the calmness of the waters, 5 artists are going to show us what it looks like when where you live influences what you make.
This is Art Loft.
If you think you're close enough, get closer.
I've thought that forever. I've just never had anyone put it into words or say it. I thought I was alone.
I saw some of the artists I recognized from Wynwood.
It is kind of a haven for them.
For those who can't travel the depths of the ocean, photographer Stephen Frink is the conduit. But do the same rules apply for photography on the ocean floor? In his home waters of Key Largo, this artist shows us that nose to fin is a good starting point.
I can't tell you how many queen angelfish I've photographed over the years, but this is the one that, of all of them, resonates more. And I think it is because the fish has personality. My name is Stephen Frink. I'm an underwater photographer from Key Largo, Florida. I travel the world for underwater photography, but this is my hometown. I'm also the publisher of Alert Diver magazine. The fish was just turning into me, and I had a 100mm macro lens on it, and it was able to lock into focus. And the eye contact is really good too. It's not like I had to chase this animal. I was there, he came to me, we had a moment, and he was gone. For marine life photography, I think proximity is one of the most important things. And I think you have to be able to project a benign presence. You have to approach the animal in a fashion so they're not threatened. So that means not moving too fast so that you don't push a big force field of water. They have to believe in you. And we also have to know a little bit about the behavior so that we know that a butterfly fish, for example, is probably going to be looking for a little crevice to find little crustaceans in, things of that nature. If you know a little bit about the fish, you can predict where they may be, and you can place yourself in that position. There's an area where a fish may flee, the field of flight. So I set everything before I enter the field of flight. So I'll set the aperture, the shutter speed. I'll think in my mind's eye, how is this photo meant to look? Where should my strobes be? So I try to do all of those things hypothetically from about 6 feet away, so I'm not inside that field of flight. People, I think, maybe think that I dive all the time. I don't, but I dive a lot in chunks of time. I'll get on an airplane and I'll go somewhere, and I'll dive real heavy for 2 weeks. I typically pick destinations by what it's particularly good for. For example, if I want to shoot great white sharks, I would either go to Guadalupe in Mexico or South Australia. I think I spent many years looking at the photography of other people and looking at the composition and think, how do they do that? So long as you have, I think, a good camera and good lights, because color doesn't really exist underwater in the absence of artificial light. Once you have the tools, you can get a serviceable photograph. I think what transcends a serviceable photograph into art is composition and the eye of the artist. I teach underwater photo seminars, and that's probably the hardest thing. And what about color? Awareness that we try to bring to my students at the outset, that no photograph is worth damaging the marine environment. It should be no surprise to anybody that the oceans of the world are in trouble. You know, there's just so many things that are affecting the ocean that a visual communicator can bring to editorial awareness. One of the things that I think is really brilliant about the whole Florida Keys, particularly the upper Keys, when you have a marine protected area, the fish trust the divers. You know, they know that we're not here to spear them, we're not here to pull them kicking and screaming out of the water to a dinner plate. I think in terms of the future of underwater photography, I think we're kind of at a threshold. So what's going to happen to make underwater photography better? For as heavy and bulky as these housings are, if it got smaller, that would be good. I think it's become far more democratic. One of the reasons that when I opened my studio here, I did well renting cameras was because nobody had them. In the morning, I would rent my camera, and if nobody rented it, I'd go diving. So that's kind of how I started here. It's exciting. If it were not for underwater photography, I wouldn't be a diver today because I'd be bored. But I'm never ever bored diving because even though it's I don't know, let's say a French angel, and I've shot 12,000 French angelfish in my life, this one's different. But there's still really, really inspiring things.
Want a closer look into this colorful world? Stephen Frink holds his masterclass each summer. You can follow his underwater adventures on Instagram or make a stop in person to his Key Largo studio located at mile marker 101 Bayside. Small tales and creatures of the heart have charmed their way to Islamorada. These whimsical cartoons are the conceptual designs of the artist Seth, who lists Dr. Seuss and Key West's own Shel Silverstein as inspiration.
I've seen people cry in here, not once, not twice, but many times. My name is Valerie Perrault. I am the owner and studio artist here at Portside Studio and Gallery in Islamorada. It's so beautiful to watch. You look at it and it's like a mirror. There's one that has two creatures and he's sending a love parade from out of his chest into his needy friend's chest, which is to me, what love is all about. When someone's low, you give them what you have, from your own heart to refill them. He's trying to reach something in a person, and they are being reached. These illustrations that Seth makes, he calls them conceptual cartoons. One of them is hand-drawn pen on paper. That's the creatures of the heart. And the other one, it's abstract paintings that he starts off with, and then he digitizes them and then uses them to collage digitally to create the final pieces, along with his little pieces of poetry that are on each piece. The current was strong and the tide was great, but this is what she was made for. I like that Harriet's just facing off with the ocean. Specifically for the Small Tale show, the pieces need the poetry, they work hand in hand. At everyone's core, we all have the same feelings and concerns, and we have the same hearts beating in our chest. We're all striving and wondering and trying to make our way in this world, and that's what he speaks to in his art, is that those universal themes. Specifically, Seth says he wants the art to be simple enough that a child gets it, but yet complex enough that it reaches an adult. All of the wording that you see on Seth's pieces, that's all his handwriting. The words are by him, the shapes of the letters are by him, the art is by him, the frames are picked out by him. They're so whimsical. When I describe him, I say he reminds me a lot of a Shel Silverstein, Eric Carle kind of mix. And when I told him that, he totally agreed. He was like, I see that. I think that these are probably influences of mine, and they're artists that I really respect. And coincidentally, Shel Silverstein has roots in Key West, and Eric Carle is a regular visitor of the gallery here at Portside, and he also has a home here in the Upper Keys. The number one thing that he wants to get across is that he spent the first 22 years of his life thinking he wasn't an artist. He didn't know how to draw formally. He felt like an artist in his heart, but he thought, well, what business do I have making art if I'm not classically trained? And so he was doing it as a hobby. And when he stopped, at some point, he stopped trying to be something that he thought other people wanted and started doing the things that made him fulfilled. The last time I spoke with Art Loft, I was working and selling out of a tiny little downstairs apartment. I moved over to an actual real gallery space. So the way I have the gallery set up is that one side is all my own art, and then the other side of the gallery is where I bring in my featured artists. So every 3 months I bring in a new featured artist. When we had the grand opening, he was friendly and accessible. You could also see he was paying attention to what people were doing. I kept thinking, oh, he's gonna write this down. It's gonna be his next piece. With good writing or with good art, that what the artist does is it makes the familiar new. And I really think that that's what Seth does. You look at it and you're like, well, yeah, I feel that. I've thought that forever. I've just never had anyone put it into words or say it. I thought I was alone.
Visit Portside Gallery, located at mile marker 81.5 Oceanside in Islamorada. Now, the gallery also stays open late for the Morada Way Art Walk, happening every third Thursday. I'm with Matt Sexton. He is the owner of Other Side Adventure Park and Keys Cable. I know you have a lot of amazing things happening here, but you also incorporate art.
I would love to say that I'm an artist, but I was actually a professional athlete when I got into what we're doing here. And I mainly did action sports. So through different events and traveling around the world, kite surfing, skydiving, wakeboarding, I ended up meeting a lot of really awesome people, you know, artists, street artists. I ended up contacting all these guys that I had worked with over the last 10 years, and I'm like, man, everyone needs to kind of come get together at this spot and see what we can create. So my partners and I started with a wakeboard park, and then it turned into, you know, a botanical garden, an organic farm, you know, an art installation place for different guys that were kind of running out of Wynwood at the time because of what it's blown up into.
I saw some of the artists I recognized from Wynwood over here.
Yeah.
And I was thinking and wondering, does this really allow them another space, another place to go that's kind of organic?
So Wynwood was this awesome place of expression and, you know, an evolution of different things with street art. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you can't just tag that. All these people that, you know, used to be able to freely express themselves there, where do these people go to do the things that they want to do in the raw, organic kind of counterculture way that they did? And so to have this down here is kind of a haven for them.
So are you like are you the curator as well?
Yeah, I've actually never even noticed that, but yeah, I'm the curator here.
Cool.
And yeah, I bring in different artists, friends of mine, or people I've actually never met that I do like their work and feel like they would be a great fit for the park. So, you know, every year we have an Earth Day festival, and we'll invite anywhere from 4 to 12 artists to come by and like paint a big piece, and each piece is in line with human effects on the environment.
So how long do the murals stay up when artists do it?
There's no end date to any of these walls. So now we're actually creating movable walls. So on 8 by 16 foot marine grade plywood, what we're doing is we're having artists paint these, and we're gonna set them up all the way around the park, like all the way around the lake, to create a huge like half-mile art walk.
Oh,
basically.
Really?
Yeah.
So you have a few murals up yourself, right?
Yeah, I have 2 in the building we're sitting in right now. One is a flamingo that's showing its skeleton.
I was kind of brainstorming with Matt Sexton one day, and we're like, man, what should we paint on this wall? Like, so many people are gonna see it on US 1. Like, how are we gonna make this like very unique and eye-catching and pull people into the park to ask questions like, why is its skeleton showing? Matt was like, and do you know this story about plumers back in the early 1900s in the Keys in South Florida? They just blast all these flamingos and take their large plumes for high fashion hats in New York City and like other major cities. I was just like, awesome, I'm gonna run with that. I knocked it out in I think like 3 days.
I love the turquoise, the glow. It's almost like it's speaking to its ancestors.
For our Earth Day Festival, I just finished a sawfish, which is critically endangered here in South Florida and all over the world, really. What I ended up doing inside the body of the sawfish was adding native Florida wildflowers. Mosquito fumigators and things like that all over the Keys are like destroying all these wildflowers.
What is this piece about here?
All right, so this piece is by Ivan Roque, and it's a clever little play on waterfront dining. He just added that at the end, and we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
there it is.
This is awesome.
I love the way everybody puts their kind of spin on the situation.
It's great because a lot of these artists too are going back to Miami or Broward, and they're, you know, starting other new conversations in their communities too.
Tourism is the big industry here, so you only got 70,000 people that live in all of the Florida Keys, but we get about 5 million visitors a year.
Right.
So how do you explain it to people where it doesn't seem random and you can give them a story?
People who want to know more about you guys.
DaveL_art on Instagram, and Other Side Board Sports as well. All those on Instagram.
Come on out to Marathon. You guys are meet these awesome guys, and you know, have a great art experience while you're saving the world.
On this unassuming street lies an art collective that is anything but traditional. One of the artists in particular at the Stockyard Studios is making intricate glass designs and is one of only a handful of artists still using this hand-painted technique.
It is a complete original. I will never make this pattern again. I wanted it to look like her hair is just fluid washing everywhere. I do each individual pattern. I use vellum paper so I can see my drawing under here. That way I can see all the striations in the glass into what I want it to look like. Then I get to cut it out. All I'm gonna do is follow my lines, and you can see all the scrap. Mosaic artists love that. Now once you have your piece, it doesn't necessarily mean that piece of puzzle is gonna exactly fit. So you have a lot of fitting to do even after this. See that burr? That's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get off what didn't break off. And when I get this done, then I copper foil it. See? That's gonna be hair. And this was this pattern, so, see? She goes in. I started out as being a professional ballerina, then I messed up my hip really bad. So I was home maybe a year in retirement, so to speak, and was going nuts and started working on stained glass. I've taught myself a lot. I started out with bathroom windows, cabinet doors, transoms, that kind of thing. I did go to class to learn how to do the bigger pieces. When you're doing an installation window, those are different. I knew how to paint and went to a few classes to learn how to do the painting on glass. There's not very many of us that do the hand painting on the glass because it's such a process. It's very difficult, it's very time consuming and very costly. You have to have a kiln, you have to have all kinds of equipment to be able to do that, and it takes anywhere from 8 to 12 hours for each firing. And then if you mess up one little thing, you have to start all over again. Because it's permanent. You can't just wipe it away like you can on canvas. Once I started doing that, the churches really started picking up a lot. I restore church windows. A while back, while living in Louisiana, Katrina hit. A gentleman that lived in Alexandria, Louisiana, he showed up on my doorstep one day with these 2 pieces wrapped in sheets. They were covered in mud, and the bulldozer, while cleaning up after Katrina, found these 2 pieces in a ditch about 2 or 3 blocks away. The story was his great-grandmother had made those 2 windows. So, because they were so destroyed, he brought me pictures of what they looked like, and I put new glass that matched it as best I could and totally gave him 2 brand new windows again. And on this piece, the customer had the back of the house renovated to have 3 windows across the back of the house. When the sun goes through the back of her house and it comes around, the sun hits a beveled piece, and you see there's several in here, the fish, the shells. It throws prisms and rainbows all over inside the house, and I think she'll enjoy that aspect of that. It started out as a little drawing with this, and she chose from 3 or 4 different ones. You can see I give the clients different drawings on what they would look like. And she chose, of course, the mermaid swimming across the windows, and then I had to draw it to scale. You can see my notes all over it, what goes where. We have to flip it over, each piece here, and solder the back. Then we have to do the same process again and flip it back around, and then I have to glaze it. Then you have to polish it and clean it. And it takes me hours to detail one, just because when you put this much into a piece, you want it perfect before it leaves.
Located just outside of Key West, the Stockyard Studios are open to the public during Art Walk every second Saturday. You can see more of their intricate designs and meet the artists in person.
Jews headed many of the smuggling networks that emerged. To the migrants whose lives were saved and families restored, these criminal organizations served a humanitarian purpose. A migrant who followed this route later told his story under the fictitious name Louis Kurland. "We lay in the boat like herring in a barrel," Kurland said. "It was very hot, and the heat from our bodies made it hotter. I am ready to go to hell if I have to. It cannot be any worse than that day in the boat."
We're here in Key West with the author Arlo Haskell. So tell us a little bit about how you evolved as a writer.
I really came up as a poet, and then about 10 years ago I had started to do a little bit of historical research, looking into the kind of literary histories of writers who had spent time in Key West, and learned that I kind of loved getting into archives. In addition to being a writer, historian, I'm the executive director of the Key West Literary Seminar. I get to make sure that literary Key West is not just part of the past. I run a small press, Sandpaper Press, and we publish poetry, a little bit of fiction. I'm sort of always working on one book or another.
Your latest book is called The Jews of Key West: Smugglers, Cigar Makers, and Revolutionaries.
Jews have thrived in this climate since the 1820s. Even where they have been forgotten, or where anonymity was essential to their survival, Jews have shaped the island we know today. Their history is the history of Key West. I'm fascinated by untold histories, and this book is full of that. My first phase of research was kind of trying to fact check family stories like that.
One of the things I found surprising and had no idea about was that Jews were part of the industry of cigars down here.
The cigar industry is one of the more popular components of Key West history, and it's always told as a Cuban story. It's certainly a big Cuban story, but actually, in fact, the cigar industry in Key West was pioneered by Jewish manufacturers, particularly a guy named Samuel Seidenberg, who capitalized on a tariff structure that made it financially advantageous to produce cigars domestically in the United States rather than on the island of Cuba.
So one of the main characters that features in your book is named Louis Fine.
Louis Fine was a Lithuanian Jewish immigrant, and he was a catalyst for the community. He was not an ordained rabbi, but he was the de facto rabbi for the community.
So we're here in the Jewish section of the cemetery at Key West, and this place sort of is one of the beginnings of organized Jewish life down here.
This is the place that brings you the furthest back in time as far as a physical place you can visit.
And in your research, did you see a lot of these names popping up?
Yeah, absolutely. I would sometimes come here to as a research visit. I found that it would help me, thinking about the people I was writing about.
So around the same time as this was established was around when the first synagogue was established, right?
That's right, yeah. The cemetery was established in the 1890s, and then in the first decade of the 1900s, Louis Fine and others purchased a wood frame building and established the first formal synagogue. There's a restaurant there today called Sarah Beth's, and B'nai Zion is the temple that continues in Key West today on United Street.
And that's the one that opened in the late 60s.
Into this thriving, multicultural, multilingual community of Key West in the late 19th century comes a very pivotal figure in Cuban history, Jose Marti, who was the one to kind of successfully crystallize the decades-long struggle for Cuban independence. Jews like Louis Fine, they lent their support to the cause. He carried this family legacy of his family having been persecuted by the Spanish during the Inquisition. What surprised me is how much that story and others had disappeared even from oral history in Key West.
Where can people find out more about the Jews of Key West?
There's a website, jewsofkeywest.com, and if you're interested in this history and interested in the book, I would say go to your local bookstore or your local library and ask for a copy.
Thanks so much for joining us for this special edition of Art Loft in the Florida Keys. To find out more about some of the artists featured in our pieces, connect with us online at Art Loft SFL.
And from Art Loft in South Florida PBS, hope you have a great summer. Now remember, art imitates life, so live a beautiful life.
Art Loft is brought to you by
Where there is freedom, there is expression. The Florida Keys and Key West.
the Miami-Dade County Tourist Development Council, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade County Mayor, and the Board of County Commissioners. And by the Friends of South Florida PBS.